Oh,
It talks to us now.
there we go.
Okay. All right. So I guess, are we ready to go here?
I think we are.
All right. Awesome. So today we have our Q&A. We did have a few questions submitted, so we'll work through those as well.
Mm-hmm. And I guess we can get started with Emma's questions, which are somewhere.
They're right here.
Okay.
All right. So one of the first questions comes off of our following our spirit communication mediumship introductory lecture. And the first question is, why is it that spirit communication or communication with the living through dreams may come more easily when no intention is set than when it is? And what can be done to fix it? And fixing this is in quotation marks. Oh, hi, Emma. We were just going through your question. So,
sorry, I thought I got the wrong link before. So.
You may have. There was an error with the link we've originally provided. So glad you were able to make it. Glad you're here now. But with the first question, why dreams may come through without a set intention more easily than when we do set an intention. There are a bunch of different reasons for this, but the most prominent one is that element of setting an intention and then kind of releasing it or letting it go. So when we set an intention for spirit communication to occur, sometimes we can be really wrapped up in the response, especially the response we're anticipating receiving or hoping to receive. Mm-hmm. And focusing in on that response can often sometimes limit then what is communicated or what communications come through. Mm-hmm. That's similar to the old adage about like manifestation work, and you have the intent and then you release the intent. There's a really great like kind of closing that the chaos magician Gordon White gives for any of his sigil work, where at the end of the sigil he closes by saying, "Does not matter, need not be." And that's kind of the paradox of magic, is like we want this thing, but then we also have to be like, oh, but it doesn't matter, I guess. Like we don't really care.
Well, we have to let go in some ways, even if we care and we do that work to have that sometimes emotional connection with what we want and that beingness in that desired state. We still have to kind of let go of maybe the details or how it's going to come, sometimes when it's going to come. And that reminds me of your question about dreaming and intention setting, is the when aspect of it, the timing aspect of it, because when you're working with magic, entities, spirits, even with yourself, time is wonky. Time is strange, and we can kind of go forward and backward through it in our consciousness, in our recalling memories. But when we're setting that intention, it may come now, it may come later.
Yeah. And it may be coming strongly without the set intention, because you actually do have an intention. Like, so being here is an intention. There's kind of the meta intention of this. Like, you're someone who is interested in mediumship, spirit communication. And so there is that element of like, you know, being open to these things, and then therefore being open to what spirit has to say when it has to say it. Which I thought was an interesting portion of the latter half of this question, which was, what can be done to fix this? And you put the fix in like an air quotes or brackets. And I felt like that was maybe a little bit intuitive on your end, because it doesn't really need a solve. It doesn't really need a fix. Playing with letting it just kind of happen as it happens, or letting it work within its own framework, in many ways can be the solve or can be the fix. If you're really looking for some kind of maybe trigger around this, maybe closing out that intention with something similar to like a does not matter, like trying to understand that we're trying to intentionalize that it doesn't matter, that we've released the intention now to the spirit world, to the universe. That may provide some more timely messages or some more contained messages, but I don't necessarily know if it needs, it's not that you're doing it wrong. Like, I want to make that clear. It's not wrong or bad. It's just kind of that feeling into the communication.
Mm-hmm. I think it's easy. It's interesting that you mentioned that during dream time, it's coming kind of coming a little bit more easily than it does from active conscious manifestation work or spirit communication. Because when we get into this liminal hypnagogic in between waking and dreaming space, so when our subconscious and our conscious mind kind of are allowed to coexist, right? And just like Dan said, consciously we want this thing, but subconsciously there might be some other things that we want possibly, right? And they're kind of meeting each other in the middle before dream time. And so if we allow for these intentions to be set right before we fall asleep, sometimes that communication can become clearer, and we're also letting go physically embodied through the sleeping process.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. And yeah, I loved your intuitive quotation marks on that one. It's like, I know, but also I want to make sure, because that is real.
Yeah. And there's a lot of like effective, Isabel, what you were talking about, that kind of taking advantage of that like hypnagogia and that yes, that liminal space. If you're familiar with like the writer Neville Goddard, who does a lot of writing around like specifically physical manifestation work and magic, he was a big proponent of taking advantage of that liminal space and understanding that it is that connective point between the conscious and the subconscious, and that kind of super highway, and that there is an element of bringing the subconscious up and the conscious down to kind of meet in that liminal space, which may be worth experimenting with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that there's like a bigness to the question that you asked that is more than just the dream time. It's more than just spirit communication. It's really reminding me of the bigness of magic and how it works, and how sometimes we feel that it doesn't work. Because I know that there have been times in my past where I've done something, I've enchanted for something in various ways, and it didn't come to me. And I kind of question, well, gosh, why didn't that work? Was that on me? Is that on you, universe? How dare you not deliver after I did this, 10-minute thing? And that's a big question in magic is, well, it works sometimes in uncanny and amazing ways, and then other times it doesn't. And why is that? Who's to blame? And something that comes to me is, perhaps there isn't anything to blame. Perhaps there isn't blame on you. Perhaps there isn't blame on whoever, whatever is delivering the results to you. It might just be something that is beyond our understanding, that we can continue to ask questions about and be curious about in our own lives. But magic really is a relationship with yourself, with spirit, with the universe, and relationships are complex. It's give and take. It's also about different iterations of yourself and beingness with yourself, because depending on what you believe, like we're part of the universe. We're part of that which we're asking to deliver these magical results, to deliver our intentions. And so I think it's really that sitting with these deeper questions, that's where the magic comes from. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think that leads into the next question that you had in the bracket about specifically language and the language by which spirit communicates, and how to deal with something like that language hurdle. I know that we had briefly mentioned this after we recorded the lecture on Wednesday.
In the past.
In the past.
At some point.
Yes. And one of the things that just keeps coming up is that element of symbolic imagery and giving spirit more options to communicate than simply via language. There are things,
multiple languages, really?
Exactly, multiple languages. There is something really telling about the dream component that you're having a lot of success with and experience with, and then this symbolic language of spirit and the way in which spirit seems to work, at least for Kat and I, effectively through that imagery. So moving to something like the spirit glass, like channeled spirit glass sessions with tarot cards can be very useful because we're asking spirit to communicate through the imagery of the cards. Similarly, I know, Isabel, you had a lot of thoughts about this.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to say as what Kat mentioned of connecting with you and your body, because ancestors sometimes, right, they are connected to us, maybe subconsciously mirroring some things that we're not making conscious as we're reaching out to them. And one of the things too, when feeling like there's a silence or there's a disconnect, I love to use and expand on symbolism and artwork and channeling artwork, because that works a different part of the mind, right? As the right hemisphere is more focused on language and actual comprehension, the other part of the mind is more connected with intuitive language and the unseen and the unspoken, which is what we are playing with when we are trying to have a conversation with ancestors and with spirit. And those things may not have words. And so the connection point to the body is what really, really is important when we are channeling spirits, and connecting with, wait, am I feeling overwhelmed right now, right? Or maybe we have been calling on the ancestors a lot and we haven't been connecting with ourselves, right? And this over-reliance on the ancestor. So it is this dance, this relationship, as Kat mentioned. And I love allowing, and this goes back to the first question too, of whatever the artwork has to say to me, to speak through me, it may not be all revealed in that one session, right? There is divine timing of certain things, something that I subscribe to with, oh, I'm so grateful this was not revealed to me yet because I probably wouldn't have said yes to this, right? And actually I needed to say yes to this to expand my capacity to take in more information, to expand my intuition, or to build up my sovereignty, right? So I definitely think time being the wonky, magical thing that it is, grateful for ancestors and spirits giving me only what I can hold on to grow into that, right? The same thing, even if you are clairsentient, clairaudient, seeing things into the future as well. Sometimes that can backtrack and we go straight into the future, and then we're not here in the present where the things need to happen, and we completely forget, and it's just future or it's just spirit. And right, there needs to be this integration, this balance between the two. And when language can be kind of difficult to put into unseen, unspoken realms, this is where art can really come in and symbolism can come in. And sometimes the symbols may come up and you're like, I have no idea what this means. However, even just taking it outside of ourselves, right? We're making it and putting it into this physical realm that we live in as humans, helps to mirror that out into the world in many different ways. Like all of a sudden, black feathers showed up in my artwork. I was like, what is that about? And I started seeing more black feathers. I wasn't consciously putting it out there, but I knew I needed assistance from my ancestors for a particular project. And so this black feather kept appearing, and something in my body felt really right and still with that. And sometimes, even more profoundly, as we know when we're channeling, emotions might be the guiding compass to saying, oh, we've made a connection. Sometimes even more than language, sometimes even more than symbol, of the stillness, the comfort, the things that come through from our ancestors that maybe are most likely rooting for us because we're the surviving genetic pool. It's like, wait, they've survived in this lifetime. Yes. So I just wanted to speak to that too, of there's so many different ways of communication.
And if there's overwhelm, like if there's, I know, Isabel, you're talking about like a lack of language coming through. If there's an overwhelming sense of, okay, this is like actually too much for me in this specific space, shunting that energy into a different space, like asking to, or transmuting that energy into a different outlet can help us process it a little bit more easily. You don't have to receive messages from spirit the way they're sending them. If it's not a clear, there's no sense in just gathering noise. Like if you're not getting useful information, then we can move that kind of needle and say, all right, well, listen, I'm not available to speak or to talk. I'm available to receive an automatic writing or art, as Isabel's saying, or a different way that works for you, just to kind of clarify that message. And I think Spirit's generally very understanding of that because it wants to tell us something. It has something to say. It wants us to figure it out. So if we can provide feedback and say, no, this isn't working, but this does work, then we can really kind of unlock and uncrack what needs to be said.
Yeah.
As an occultist, I find it difficult to not take in the noise. I want to take in all the things. I want to gather all the data points and record them because I have heard instances from other occultists and instances in my own life where I will note something and not understand and not think it's important, and then later on realize how this has been a bigger part of my story. But Dan is absolutely right. When it becomes overwhelming, when it becomes kind of like a slog to do, you're just doing it to collect the data. You kind of really are separating yourself from the magic, and in a way that I think is not as helpful as these outlets that Isabel is talking about, these art times of creation. And as Dan was talking about, times of just taking it in, and other times of saying, okay, I need space for myself. I need to, because that's very important. Mm-hmm. That's very important in doing magic and receiving messages, is taking that time you need for yourself to sit where you are. I found that really important in sort of helping me know what's my ego speaking and what is spirit. Because if I give that space for the ego to speak, then it doesn't need to come up when I'm listening to spirit. And it's funny because sometimes when I'm doing my automatic writing sessions, I'll have to stop a little bit because I know something is really deeply wanting to come out of me, of my ego, and I need to have space because I didn't create that space before. And that's a little bit of a tangent. That's a little bit of a digression, but
no, these things are all kind of interwoven. Mm-hmm. So it's a process of experimentation.
Mm-hmm. And just like the right inhale and an exhale, because right, we're in this physical realm, in this iteration of our bodies, using these patterns that are already available to us of, all right, inhale, I will take in the information in this channeling session or through automatic writing or through right before dream time. Mm-hmm. The exhale of the space and taking what serves you, leaving the rest, allowing self to process, checking in with your body, all these kinds of things. Discovering what your rhythm is, that is really that experimentation, which is, I think, some of the most fun part of doing occult work, because everyone's got their own rhythm on this.
Yes.
Yeah, and just to your point about their desire to speak a certain language, if you have space for that, I think it's fine for you just to listen, even if you don't, get anything necessarily out of that. Sometimes we are able to sort of hold space for our own ancestors, if that's something you desire. Um,
Yeah, there's so there are these like this thought around exalted ancestors of how it can kind of like sorted through their stuff, and they're here to like help you out. They've aligned themselves. They are, they're just about. And then there are spirits and ancestors who like still have a lot that they're kind of working through. And if you have the space for it, and if it's not bringing you down, and you want to hear that out, that's perfectly acceptable. And that can also be helpful in, not that it's necessarily our responsibility to, move ancestors along these lines, but it can be useful. That's another question, actually. So you can hear them out and just kind of sit with, oh, well, that was an interesting experience. The trick there is, of course, not letting it become an all-consuming part of the practice, or feeling like you owe some kind of time or space to these experiences. And I think that's where like historically a lot of like channeled occultists kind of lost the plot, was where they were receiving these messages and there was a reception of, oh my gosh, something is picked through and is saying like hello. And then they ended up with like stacks of channeled books that really went nowhere, and it was just kind of a big exercise. If you're into that thing, great. If not, that's kind of that, the path to walk, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a question then moving on, which is more of like a meta question, which is great. Very excited to talk about this, which is, will there be more and/or other classes available in future quarters of SOA? And are people from the first quarter allowed or able to be a part of future quarters? So here we go. What does quarter 2 of SOA look like? And how will quarter 1 cohort be involved with quarter 2?
Yes, we're super excited about this. And for quarter 2, we have the deconstruction class that I know we've talked about before as things were coming up for folks in classes. Which PE, which we'll have a fun announcement about soon with the kickoff of quarter 2 with that. Since a lot of quarter 1 was a lot of mind work and intellectual history, we also want to make sure that the physical body is connected with an occult practice as well. So we're going to kick that off then. Ancestral work, as we are all talking about, all of the ancestral work and channeling, there will be a class, a deep dive on ancestral work, tools, practice, but also ways that you can incorporate within your own practice, ways from the past that have also been incorporated before, and how we can do that as well. We also will have a, by popular demand, a Devil Lecture Part 2 coming in, which will be a lot of fun. There's just with all of the topics that we talk about, we know we're just skimming the surface. So thank you all for your feedback on, ooh, we want more of this, or can we dive deep into that? You are all co-creating this with us. So all those demands, we listen and we mark it down for the future. And then we also have ideas around, some things may go from quarter 2, quarter 3, but based on time and capacity of everybody, a glamour magic, which will be a lot of fun, implementing beauty and fashion, history of glamour magic, and then also kind of by popular demand, but also just something very important that we're also touched upon a little bit in the questions, was manifestation practices, and how can those be tangible, what internally needs to happen, mind, body, and spirit-wise with manifestation. And then the super one, future SOA coming in, introduction to Kabbalah, and a whole month worth of the origins of occult teaching, because Kabbalah it's a whole iceberg of things in the practice. But it's such a beautiful practice that has stemmed out to create so many other schools of thought in occultism. So we knew that that would be something that would be a lot of fun to share with you all, to give you the overview, but also some deep dives.
Yes.
During that. And Dan, did you want to speak about, are people allowed?
Yes. So yeah, everyone, of course, who's here is allowed to be part of quarter two. We, of course, expected that you would all be part of quarter two if you so wanted to be. And we are just going to be touching on a lot of stuff that we've kind of like mentioned to a degree in here, but then people said, yeah, we want a class about this. So one of the things that I'm super stoked about is we are going to be, because the Devil 2 lecture was a thing that people really wanted, you can't really talk much deeper about the devil without also talking about the other angelic beings around that. So we're going to be talking angel magic, which of course ties into Kabbalah with Enochian magic. So there's like a lot to pick through in quarter two. This is going to be great. For quarter two, anyone who signs up in the future, as in when we're launching quarter two for the public to accept new people to this SOA group, there is going to be a price increase because of the sheer number of courses, as well as the time that we're investing in this. For quarter one individuals, everything remains the same. If you cancel and sign up later, then there's other rates which will be associated with that. But if you're just like sticking it out through quarter two, your grandfather, grandmothered into the prices, there's no change there. So essentially it will be unbroken. We'll have a July pause in terms of live courses. You'll still have access to everything, access to the community, and we'll be doing a special summer course, which Isabel has kind of mentioned a little, but we'll go into a little bit more depth. That's really
hands-on.
Exactly. It's a hands-on kind of guided ritual working for everyone to engage with, to kind of reground, recenter as we've come out of a lot of the intellectual stuff, to get back in the body, especially for quarter two's angel work, manifestation work. All of that requires that kind of energy movement and mind-body connection. So July is a way to kind of hit the ground running into that mind-body connection.
Yes. And just as we were talking about inhales and exhales, thinking of July being this exhale, and to give you all the option of engaging in a full-on month of witch PE and exploring that as a ritual, as a practice to connect in with your body, because I know some of you I want to do it all, having a look and reviewing all of the things that you've learned this past quarter, right? Going back through your book of shadows and seeing where your intuitive nudges are leading you to explore as a ritual or as a practice in the month of July. So at the beginning of the month, starting off with some witch PE and exploration and reflection, and seeing what is it that I really desire to manifest, to unfold, to really solidify in my solitary practice by the end of July, that I would love to see physically manifested, spiritually, emotionally manifested, right? And then tracking that in your book of shadows, in your grimoire, and at the end of July, beginning of August, sharing your findings, right? Just like scientists of the occult in the month of July, and seeing what is it that you found, and be like, wait, actually this spell really worked, or this ritual was really supportive for me, or I didn't know my ancestors felt this way. Right?
That's amazing.
And of course, acting as the academic advisors, in which some cases we seem to be, if you need support with that, or you have questions about that, that's what the SOA group is here for. And Kat and I and Isabel will be interacting with that and providing what guidance we can, noting this is a solitary, practice. Well, most magic kind of can be, but that group element will be there for us, and we'll be there, of course, to provide context or support if we can from our space. And then we're really excited to hear what people come away with in July.
Yes. the new findings, because everyone's going to come away with their own unique practices and things and modifications of rituals and, you know, new discoveries. And for those of you that are just like, you know what, I don't want to do more research. My mind is just, I want to do witch PE for the entire month. That is totally fine. And I will also be joining here and there on the witch PE train, because I'm back in that ritual as well with you all. So be like, I did drink my water, I got my water element in, or I did my air and I did my mindset work this morning with my automatic writing, and just sharing a little bit of that, because that's the part of the community that I know for myself personally over the years as a practitioner have found so much value in. Is other people that are also doing this alongside with me. We may not be in person and we're all doing our solitary things, but there's something to community witnessing and celebration, and I think has something to say about developing your craft individually.
Yeah, and it's really like another level of learning about this. It's the experiential knowledge. It's the, well, I know all this in my head, but how does it apply in my real life? And I find that's a really wonderful way to really get all that you can out of these lectures, all that you can out of occult knowledge, is to do that in your own life. So we'll be doing that together.
Yeah, which is going to be, I think, very good. I'm excited. I'm very excited because I've been seeing a huge shift in the conversation right now amongst some like more prominent magical thinkers. I wonder, Isabel, if you've noticed this too, or Kat, I know we've talked about it. This shift to people suddenly talking about the body and talking about energy and talking about like energy work through the body and grounding, rooting to a space. In a way that I hadn't noticed when I started out with magic. And being that the world is kind of opening back up and we're coming into summer, we're going to be doing things outside, it just feels like the appropriate time to say, okay, we've spent a year in solitude, we've spent a year away from everyone else. How now do we kind of reconnect to source? So that will be July, and then in August we start back up with Q2. So some of those lectures will be recorded, some of those lectures will be live, the breakdown just as we've discussed. There will be workshops again.
A lot of them will be live.
A lot of these will be live because they will require that real deep interaction between the individuals facilitating and the people who join.
Mm-hmm. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So we have some time left on our schedule. If anyone here would like to ask any additional questions, we are available.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if not, that's fine. We'll post the replay, of course, in SOA. And if you have any questions there, you can, of course, type them into the comments and we'll either put them into the next Q&A or we'll try and answer questions in the comments as well. I know some people didn't get to join today. So. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, well, we can give you a little bit more time back in your day. Thank you all for joining and giving us your wonderful questions.
Yes.
And we'll see you in the Great Hall.
That's right.
Yes.
All right, okay. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.